All right, it seems like we have our last few attendees have joined us. Thank you again, everyone. My name is Eric Malloy. I am your host for today. I will be leading our discussion with our industry panelists here. So joining me today on the webinar, we have Mr. Danny DeFreitas with Extreme Landscaping. He is Director of Client Services. We have Beth Rappaport with us from Brightview Landscaping. She is a Business Development Executive. And we have Mr. Robert Boyd, the Senior Business Development Manager with ProGreen Services. So thank you to our panelists. I'll allow you guys to kind of give a little bit of a quick introduction to yourselves, kind of welcome everybody to our webinar. We'll start with Ms. Rappaport.
Thank you so much, and thank you for organizing this today. I'm happy to be here. I'm Beth Rappaport. I'm with Brightview. I also, for all the board members here, I am also a board member. I'm president of my HOA, and I come from Castle Group. So whatever pain it is you're feeling, I've probably felt it, and happy to be here for you as a resource.
Thank you. Thank you. Robert, you're up.
Thank you again, Eric and Castle, for having me as part of this panel. My name is Robert Boyd. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for ProGreen Services. My background is in landscape architecture and horticulture. I was brought down to South Florida by Terry Stiles with the Stiles Corporation over 20 years ago, where I worked extensively with the Castle Group during those years. I'm excited to be with ProGreen Services. We're a very innovative, full-service landscape firms. My role is spearheading regional development throughout the state of Florida. As we say, we're Floridians working for Florida, is what we like to say. So anyway, thank you for having me.
And last but definitely not least, Danny.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me as a panelist. I am with Extreme Landscaping. My role is Director of Client Services, and I oversee the client experience. And that's from origination, from the point that they start with Extreme Landscaping, and then retaining accounts. So along the way, touches, monthly touches, board orientations, making sure that all of our property managers and board members are always in the know. Communication is extremely important. And I also oversee a lot of our marketing as well.
Excellent. Thank you, panelists, for joining us. Today, I wanted to sort of bring everyone together. The real purpose of today's webinar is to have more of a discussion on impacts within the landscaping industry that a lot of us are seeing that directly impact the service levels and sort of planning and things that board members should be taking into consideration. A lot of times, on being on the property management side, landscaping is generally your largest line item in your budget. Depending on the size of your property, you can see landscaping contracts in the millions of dollars. It's also the most, I think, one of the most impactful. It's the one thing that everyone sees the second they step on your property. There are direct correlations. You can look at studies that have shown, an increase in the value of landscaping directly increases the property value and sale prices of units. So it is a very impactful piece of your overall management plan. So we really wanted today to discuss some of the options and sort of the impacts that we're seeing as an industry that are impacting board members and communities as a whole. So we'll cover a range of topics. Of course, if you have some questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat, and we'll try to address those. We did have some questions that were submitted on the registration that we'll also try to address. So without any further ado, I think I'm going to jump right into it and really get to the meat of the conversation. I would say I'll start with Robert, because you're top left in my screen, and we'll go around and please open discussion. What are some of the sort of the first impacts? I know for me, it's really been always labor. That's one that's at the forefront every year. So kind of discuss, I guess, or give us your feedback, Robert, on what we're seeing in the market as far as labor.
Well, as we all know, landscape is a very labor-intensive industry. It's what drives every decision that we make, any organization makes. We essentially are a labor organization. Materials another piece, but labor drives everything from price to on down the line. What we strive at ProGreen to do is to really, what we like to say, maintain a deep bench. a deep bench of talent so that we're not as susceptible to highs and lows. We experienced a few months during the COVID crisis that there was an issue with labor. It was just, it wasn't, people weren't knocking on our door like they normally do. But
Oh, we may have lost Robert there. Looks like maybe the internet is is playing with us. Beth, if you want to jump in and maybe we'll see if Robert can get back in.
Yeah, absolutely. As I think he was kind of leaning towards saying, materials cost. Oh, is he back?
He
Robert, are you
looks
back?
like he just popped back in.
I don't know what caused that, by the way. Go ahead, Beth.
Materials cost is something that is definitely on the increase. Everybody's finding, with inflation, equipment has been a little bit harder to procure. That Suez Canal incident a few months ago created a lot of setbacks, not only for cars, but also for the equipment, Kubotas, and all of those types of vehicles that we use in our industry. So there's upward pricing pressure from a variety of directions.
And Robert, if you'd like to jump back in and finish that on the labor.
I don't know where you guys left out on my little tirade, but I was basically just, saying that in the last few weeks with some of the changes coming down from Tallahassee, it really changed kind of the direction of what we're seeing in our office as far as applicants. But our challenge has been really to keep a bench of trained people that we can pull back and bring in as new properties come on, as people leave, on and on and on. But again, like Beth was saying, the supply chain prices are going up on everything. Labor prices, we know, are going up. Materials are going up. There's nothing that's coming down. So it's everything's being affected. It seems across the board.
Insurance as well. Landscaping is a business. Businesses have a lot of insurance that we've got to carry, very high minimum coverages. And the price of insurance is rising rapidly, not just for homeowners, but for businesses as well.
Insanely rapid.
So, and I would add on top of that, we all know that minimum wage is going up. So right now, I think it's just below $9. And then next month, it's going to increase to $10. And then every year after that, it's going to increase another $1 up until 2026, until it's $15. So that right now is something that's, in every company's head. So basically, do you want to go ahead and get any of your employees at 15, like slowly move them up to that? Or do you just want to go ahead and put them at $15 in 2026? And then as we know, the cost of living is always going up. So, you have to give your guys annual increases. And then COVID on top of it, the workforce, the labor pool, it's not what it was before. You can either go and work for a company and make, let's say, $13 an hour, or you can sit at home and make maybe even more than $13 an hour. So, the labor pool out there knows that there are other options. But so it's a little harder now is what I'm saying, to find, good, competent workers.
Yeah, Danny, you may experience with being in business like you've been, the $10 an hour employee is a thing of the past. Even the $12 an hour employee is a thing of the past. And boards need to realize that, not just in landscape, but every avenue of what they're looking at when they're looking at pricing, and especially as we come into bid season.
Yeah.
Finally,
I'm sorry, Beth, you go ahead.
land is at a premium, and a lot of the landscaping companies have been pushed out of their locations in various areas, and are having to search for new locations at great expense.
That's a great point. I don't know if a lot of people are really aware of that. There's been some here in Palm Beach County. There's been some, I don't want to say legislation, but I guess it's been more of enforcement for rules that were in place before that maybe weren't being enforced, where you've had property that was traditionally listed in the ag reserve, which is supposed to be for agriculture only. And a lot of companies were utilizing that land and had been there for any number of years. And now they're literally being forced off and told that they cannot have their operations on these properties. So, with real estate being at a premium here in Palm Beach County, where can you base an operation? Where can you have the trucks and the personnel and the storage for all the stuff? So that is, right, it's a direct impact on our service suppliers. If their rent for the property where they're storing and housing and operating their business, if the rent goes up, well, then that's a direct cost. And we all know sort of here in Palm Beach County, real estate is at a premium right now. So there are so many factors. Generally, when I've talked to board in the past, the attitude has always been, well, they just cut grass. And that sort of is no longer the case. So you have to kind of be cognizant when you're putting together your bids and when boards are asking for these companies to come in, why are the prices the prices? Because you have a lot of these impacts. Danny, you bring up a really good point with the increases. These are government mandated increases to minimum wage. These are not just the market fluctuating or people wanting more money. These are requirements. So that may be something that boards need to look at when you're planning. Most boards will do a 1 year. Some boards will do 3 years. Some boards will do 5. What do you guys see as far as the impacts when you have boards that are budgeting on a 1 year basis and you're trying to put together a multi-year program? What are some of the impacts that you're seeing as far as the service levels and budgeting? And I'll go back to Beth on this one. I know you've had a lot of experience too on the property management side. What sort of impacts are you seeing as far as the budgeting side?
Well, a lot of the conversations that people start with us, begin with, yeah, so we'd like to reduce our budget. And by the way, we don't like how our landscaping looks. Well, those two things are kind of mutually exclusive. Your landscaping, if you don't like how it looks now, you're probably not going to like how it looks for less. And as well, with all the price increases that we've just talked about coming from all the different fronts, federal government, state government, local government, plus just all the other increases, it's really not possible. And the way that I, kind of perceive it is that when we had the Great Recession around 2008, it was almost like a really hard reset on a lot of communities' budgets. And communities absolutely had to, with the number of people in some state of foreclosure, really had to cut back on a lot of stuff. And even though real estate has rebounded, budgets really haven't. They're kind of stuck in time about 10 years. They kind of just got very static, really didn't change with the times. And so now that real estate is hot, it's taken off, residents are expecting more, buyers are expecting more. It really is, I think, time to take another look to see what can be done, with the budget. Some things might have been eliminated in the past that really need to be added back in.
Well, that's the challenge some of the board members, when you meet with them, to go back 10 years and see what they were paying in landscape. It's an interesting study. Because yes, back in 06, 07, things were much higher in most cases for a lot of these communities. But it's a simple correlation. Price is directly related to labor when it comes to our landscape budgets. It really is a time situation. As developers, like we all are, when we're pricing a job, the time that we allocate to those jobs dictates the price. If we reduce the time, we can reduce the price. It's a direct correlation, and it's as simple as that. And when people say they want more time on their property, that comes at a price. Somebody has to pay for it. It can't come from the landscape pockets. We can't afford to keep doing that. And that's what's been happening since 08. We've had to cut during those years to maintain these properties, and you can't keep doing that. We all were saying back during 08, 07, when all that started, to cut budget. Once you cut it, how are we going to go back again? And that's where we are now.
Yeah, and essentially, if you are, looking to cut your budget, you're looking to cut your services and your quality of service. So you just have to keep that in mind. It's you have to be realistic that it's not often that you can get more for less. So
Yeah, we always have seen that in the budgets, what line items get cut first, and it's generally landscaping. And you have an emergence of the industry has evolved, right? So when I started in it basically, to an extent, it was just cutting grass. It was cut the grass, cut the bushes, cut the trees. And as science has evolved and sort of the industry has evolved, new problems have arisen. The old day of $7 an hour guy to mow, $10 an hour guy to cut, and then a guy doing trees, those are out the door. There's specialized equipment. There's requirements from the cities as far as what you can cut, how much you can cut. So these are all sort of factors that have to be taken into consideration. And I'm sure with the professionals here, we always try to write some of those things into the contracts. But what are you guys seeing when in dealing with boards, the trends or some of the issues that are coming up on the contractual side? I always say, because I would get a bid from a property and it would be last year's bid with a magic marker with the price and the name of the vendor, and the scope would be exactly the same. And you're just kind of handed a one pager and said, here, bid on this. So what are some of the sort of the trends and service levels and things that you guys are seeing that boards are issuing in contracts?
Well, I mean, I'll start off on that one. So they want us to bid in this example that you've given, bid on the scope of work that they had previously. But they're looking for a new landscaper for a reason, right? And it's probably because they're not maintaining it at the property at the level they'd like, which means that maybe there wasn't enough fertilizer, maybe there wasn't enough flowers, maybe they're not mulching often enough, maybe they're only trimming their perimeter hedge once a year instead of quarterly. So there's a bunch of things there, and it's like, if you want to get the property up to an A level or a B level where you guys are happy, you may have to spend a little bit more money.
Well, the reverse is true as well, that we see a lot. The days of the one-page RFP seem to be over with. They're getting more and more complicated, these legal documents. And I think a lot of boards are looking towards tying companies down with legal documents and seeing that trend constantly. Is that really the answer? As a lot of my attorney friends tell me, if you get to that point where you're litigating a contract, you're in trouble, all sides. That's not the point. And the kind of direction with where we're going as far as doing these bids, looking at the exact surface of what the property needs. I see an awful lot of properties way too much mulch. I see an awful lot of properties way too much over pruning, mowing. There's the extreme as well, and it's really analyzing, drilling down, what does that particular community at that specific time for that community. Again, we're dealing with living things. People need to remember it's not stagnant like architecture. It's a living thing, and it changes through the years. And evaluating those contracts that are be very relevant for that time and place, and then also looking at the crystal ball, 5 to 10 years. What's this community going to need as far as its maintenance requirements down the road? And that's the real technique of the landscape industry. That's my 2 cents on that whole thing.
And Beth, anything that you're sort of seeing along the same line in the contracts, also having been on the management side and understanding where boards kind of go with things, is there anything that you're sort of seeing, anything that boards should be avoiding?
One of the things that I have seen quite recently over the past few months is, RFPs that are really over-engineered. Some of them are like 50, 60 pages, and they can take, weeks to do. And I think that people, board members and property managers do not always understand how much time goes into putting together pricing for landscaping, and how much of the team's time, it's not just like there's one person working on it. It involves the whole team. It's really important that the job be priced accurately, and a lot of effort goes into that. And then to have kind of like a 50, 60 page thing where, you're writing like essays, and, it's like a college application, it feels like. I understand that the intent is to hire the best person for the job and make sure the property looks the best it can. But that might not be the best way to go about it. And, the other thing is, I've seen boards where they'll have, like 12 companies come out, and that's an awful lot of time for the board as well to meet with 12 vendors. That's an awful lot of time. And And then the other thing, and this is just a little bit of a pet peeve, is when there's a mandatory, vendor call and you're not supposed to be able to bid on it if you're not at that mandatory meeting. And then you go to deliver the proposal, and let's face it, you're all in the parking lot at the same time delivering your proposals, and you run into each other and you're like, hey, wait a minute, you weren't at the bid meeting. Wow, how are you submitting a bid? It's just kind of, like a little, just like an etiquette, type of thing. And then finally, not announcing who won the bid. There are, bids that it's months and nobody has been picked, and there's no timeline. The timeline that might have been included in the RFP is not being adhered by. And, maybe we had an account manager that we had kind of earmarked for that account, and, some equipment and, some crews, or maybe the account had, some special things on it, mangroves or something. And, we've already kind of started like assembling the resources, and now we're just hanging, waiting for an answer.
Thank you for saying that, Beth. That's greatly appreciated.
Definitely.
It's hard to tell people no, but at least it closes the door and we can move on.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
And we have all spent a lot of time putting together this stuff, and some we are owed at least an answer with the amount of time and resources that have been spent on it.
Definitely.
Are you guys reading the questions that are coming up?
I was actually just going to bring one of those up. We had one come in. It was less of a question, but I think it was a pretty salient point that I want to throw out to the group. But it says that some of the reasons for one-year contracts is that companies promise the world, and a one-year contract gives the board a chance to gauge the quality of work. Any thoughts on that from our panelists? I'd love to hear your opinions, yay or nay.
So I personally, we start out with a 3-year contract, but if a board wants to do a 1-year contract, we don't necessarily have a problem with it. We're confident in the services that we provide. So 1 year comes around and it's time to either renew or resubmit another proposal. We're confident that we can re-sign them for maybe a longer contract at that point, once they see that we are following through with what we said that we would be able to do. So
my feeling on it, Eric, is kind of this. It's very easy to think of landscape as a janitorial business. We are not. We are landscape professionals that have been trained in how to deal with a lot of aspects, including agronomy, etymology, physiology. The list goes on and on and on, botany, biology. We're dealing with living things here. It's not that we're sweeping the grass or sweeping the pavement. It's an involved process that takes time. And when selecting the bidder, you would hope the integrity of the company is taken into account, and there's at least an appreciation for what that bidder brings to the table. And that's why you're hiring them. Hopefully not just on price, but because you feel like the organization can rise to the challenge and do what the scope of work that's been put out there for you. And with that, it's like the partnership needs to be developed between the board and the contractor. And if that's not really front and present at the time of signing, that contract's going to be in jeopardy pretty much from day one. And that's the goal I think all of us are striving for. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning, to have those relationships with people so that we can develop our businesses and develop our reputations and on and on. Same thing with the associations we're associated with.
Yep, and I think it sort of goes back to some of the points that Beth was bringing up before, is when you have just a straight RFP process where you put together a document that says we want 34 mows and we want 12 trims, and you send it out to 15 vendors, you simply don't have enough time to do a lot of the legwork. We've typically seen contracts where you get issued it on a Monday and they're telling you the following Friday you need to have the bid in, and it's $1 million contract, and there's really no time to source references, look at other properties, to kind of do the legwork in the bid process that makes you comfortable. So for me, a 1-year contract is it's a good guarantee for companies to see what they're doing, but it almost seems like if there was maybe a little bit longer process or maybe a little bit more involvement. I mean, you don't have to wait to contact these vendors and work with some of our professionals when you're ready to bid your landscaping, right? They're more than happy to meet with you and talk and really review the property and go through a longer process. It doesn't have to be just when you're ready for landscaping. You should really have a relationship and kind of have an idea of the quality of work and the vendors are you want to pick before you send those RFPs out. That would enable you to be comfortable with the work and potentially move into a longer term contract, which in some respects can secure your pricing and give you an easier budgeted cost over 3 years, 5 years, whatever the length of the term is. And look, every contract has cancellation clauses in it. But I think sometimes boards rush the process, or we need to fire this vendor right away and have a new one in here in 2 weeks. And that really doesn't get enough time to sharpen the pencil. That's sort of my thoughts on it. I think our panel has done a pretty good job. We also had a question come in where Douglas had asked if it would be possible to have model contracts to consider. So we will have the emails of all of our presenters up at the end of the presentation. And I would be happy, I think anybody would happy to have a discussion with you in regards to some contracts and maybe provide some of those. So we've talked about the bid process. I think another one that generally doesn't come up, some associations take advantage of it, but it's always the monkey in the industry, or the 300-pound gorilla, is hurricanes, right? So I know a lot of associations will try to have storm agreements in place. These are negotiated contracts. So if you have an event, I'd love for our panel to kind of discuss maybe some of the impacts of that and the benefits. Robert, do you have any feedback as far as what boards should be doing for hurricane or storm agreements?
Well, I come from the long line of experience of several years ago when we were literally having storms dancing across the Caribbean every week. And once you clean up for one, another one would hit, and another one would hit, and another one would hit. It literally happened several years ago for those that were not down here during that enjoyment time. And this was prior to Andrew, which again, we don't even acknowledge what could happen with that. We have to be realistic about contracts as well, is that we're dealing with the health and safety issue in the beginning. Again, once all clear is given, the way our organization is structured, because we do have multi-locations, we do have crews that can be maneuvered from other locations if we need additional help and everything else. But it's really a realistic contract about what do we do and how do we as a company engage. And I think the others have the same policies of how we maneuver our crews, how we address health and safety first, and then move on to clearing roadways, and then move on to, there's a whole procedure that we have in place with our clients. As far as preferred vendor that would get first and foremost attention, that's always a slippery slope with any project. Again, depends on the level. If we have on-site staff, that's a whole nother ball game than if we have other staff that's basically on a rotation basis. It really depends on a case-by-case situation. We deal with that individually per client. And again, it really depends on the severity of the storm at the time. It has a lot to do with it. I'll make this quick. The days of it just falling to a regional professionals to clean up after storms are over with. They're massive corporations that come in and now clean up after storms. And that's kind of the rule of the land. Florida hasn't experienced that like some other regions have recently, but it's amazing the massive firms that come in that other company. And that's another avenue we can also help our clients get in touch with and organize when it comes closer to that period to have in place.
Danny, do you see any and thankfully, knock on wood, we have not had a major sort of event for a number of years now, but do you see any sort of issues as far as the budgeting, when boards should this be something that boards, it's an unknown, but is it something that they should be working into agreements or have agreements in place so that the pricing, is there any impact on the pricing from what you see?
Well, so it's a known unknown You know what I'm saying? Because it's Florida. So it's like, well, if it's not this season, it's next season or the season after that. So yes, I would say that you'd want to have budgeting in place for it. Just because if we get hit hard, the cost can be extremely high. You know, the thing is our hurricane agreement, we send it out to all of our properties, and let's say 50% come back and say, yes, we agree. Those 50%, right after a hurricane, we are going to visit those properties and since the take a scope of the urgency of who needs to be, you know, okay, they're blocking the roadway into the neighborhood. This tree is about to fall on this house. So those are the properties that we're going to take care of first, and then after that, it's a cleanup. So the thing is that you want to know what you're going to be charged, because when it's all hands on deck and it is basically working, let's say 16 hours days for the crews, and you know it's dangerous out there, the cost can be extremely high. So you're going to want to have an agreement in place, especially since if you don't have an agreement in place and you're going to be reaching out to your landscape company or other landscaping companies, you might not be able to get someone out there.
And yeah, they may not even be able to respond because they may be blocked in, depending on the severity of the storm. Now, I know too that there's always sort of an opportunity. Some boards will, you know, sometimes this will be an insurance, right? It'll be an insurance payback. It'll be a claim. Other times, you know, how long it takes to get the claim processed, get reimbursed. Some boards will have line of credits. So Beth, I mean, I'm sure you'll probably go along with the group. I think we all are kind of in a consensus agreement on this. So anything to add as far as storm agreements for customers? Should they work that into the original bid, or do you think that should be something that's more along like a secondary agreement that can be done renegotiated each year? Any feedback on that?
Usually like a standalone agreement that's sent at the beginning, you know, or prior to hurricane season each year is probably adequate. And then the other thing that I would add to the other feedback is it's really important on the property side to have the chain of command established. You know, maybe we think it's the president. Well, actually the president evacuated. So they're not on site. They might not be in a position to make educated decisions. So it's really good to have it very clearly outlined, you know, what the decision-making process will be, because sometimes these decisions do have to be made, you know, really on the spot. It might not be possible to, you know, have a board meeting because it just needs to be dealt with, you know, immediately.
That's an excellent point, actually, because we do have a lot of properties down here where during the summertime, you know, hurricane season, typically a lot of people aren't in residence. They may be at a northern address or they may be traveling. So do you have that sort of chain of command? Do you have that established? And does your vendor know about it? You know, we've all kind of seen the impacts. If you've been down here, it used to be the landlines would be knocked out. Well, now it's the power's knocked out and nobody can charge their cell phones, or the cell towers are so overloaded that it takes longer to get calls. So having that plan in place is really beneficial. You don't, especially, you know, you have communities that maybe have one gate, they have one ingress and egress. So is that gate clear? Can we get emergency vehicles in and out of it? I think for me, it was always something that was overlooked and really not put in place until it was kind of there's a storm coming moment, and then it's thought about. So very, very good points. Thank you for that. So I think at this point, we're getting close. We're about half an hour in. So what I'd really like to do is kind of throw it to our panelists and, you know, some upcoming trends or services or things that you think will be impacting the industry going forward that our attendees should be aware about if they should be considering changes for landscaping coming up. You know, what are some of the things that you guys are seeing on the horizon? Robert, I'll start with you.
Well, first I'd like to say, Beth, that was a great point with hurricanes, because it is during a crisis and people are trying to figure out who's in control, and it's amazing who suddenly takes charge in some cases on properties during a crisis. And having that established by a board is essential. In a lot of cases, it's not, as we all have experienced. Trends on the horizon, what we see. The grain industry is dynamic like everything else, especially in South Florida. In terms of what's the best terminology, I'll use Florida friendly. That seems to be the most across the line, doesn't dive into anything questionable, meaning plant options, insect control, fertilization, all of the above. It's beginning to be more and more of a conversation, and I would have to say I applaud those efforts for this region. It's about time we take control of those issues here. Palm Beach seems to be leading the parade on a lot of things right now. That's going to just spread, it seems like. But with every board, as far as plant selection down to the fertilization requirements, all the things we've been discussing, insect control, everything is a hot topic now as far as how to do it within the new state requirements that we'll all be experiencing, and also between what is the right thing to do, especially if you're dealing with a waterfront community and an established community, an aging community. Our region is getting older. We do have our share of new construction, but a lot of these older aging communities, how to move on, make them more relevant, make them more of property values, like you said earlier, to increase, be a little more relevant to the new buyers coming from other areas, which we're all seeing is kind of the key. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the current trends that seem to be the hot buttons out there now.
Beth?
I think, another interesting trend is the fertilizer restrictions that are being imposed by the municipalities. Whereas, you can't fertilize between 6/1 and 10/31. And, I think that there are some, scopes of work that need to be updated to reflect those recent restrictions. But, due to the increases in toxic algae, these restrictions, as Robert said, with kind of Palm Beach leading the way, are definitely becoming more common throughout the state. And, a lot of municipalities are also imposing, due to the drought, irrigation restrictions. So that's something else to bear in mind.
Excellent point.
I
And
take note on it. What I would say is that, we have some supply line issues, right? Basically with COVID going on right now, and, people not working, whether it's here domestically or internationally, it's causing supply line issues. So whether we're buying, vehicles for our fleet, or whether we're buying power, power tools, other equipment, there's backlog. So things aren't as easily available. So our SLAs may be changed as a result, or we may not be able to meet our SLAs. So one really good thing with us is that we're huge on communication. So we communicate exactly what's going on along the way and keep you updated. So if we can't meet our SLAs, you're in the know. There's no surprises. But in addition to that, costs have increased, and so plants are, and not all plants are available. Let's say that, normally you had this plant available in a 15-gallon size or 7-gallon size, and now it's only available in a 3-gallon size. So there may be issues fulfilling expectations. And the thing is that 3-gallon plant, right? It may be in a 7-gallon pot now. So the customer may have to pay a 7-gallon price and only be getting what they're used to, a 3-gallon plant. So the costs have gone up on plants. The certain plants are just not available like they were before. And then costs have gone up on things like fertilizer, irrigation part. It's overall, things have changed due to COVID, and then also due to the freeze in Texas as well. A lot of their plants and materials got killed off during the freeze, so they in turn had to come over here and purchase a lot of our inventory. So it made things a little harder for us over here. And then in addition to that, construction. There's a big construction boom going on right now. So, there's not a lot of material like there normally is, or those materials now the growers are selling them off when they're smaller. So it's just some trends and some things that have changed recently.
And like you guys had said, the real estate issue, that a lot of nurseries are being pushed out as well. And it's harder and harder for us to find the farms like there used to be. They're not as plentiful as they used to be in South Florida. And that's going to be a trend that will only continue.
Yeah, I think that's really a big one that not a lot of people really were aware of or caught on to, and how that's going to impact some vendors may actually even be pushed out. So the pool of available vendors may become smaller, which then from a secondary impacts the price, because Robert had pointed out it's really a time quotient when you're putting together these bids. So if you're limited on how many vehicles or space for your business to operate out of, then you have the pressure coming in from, how many employees can you have, and you're trying to bring on new business. Well, that all comes, there's only so many hours in a day that can be cut. So if you don't have the capability or the space or the materials or labor to add more crews, then you really can't take on that new business, which may lead to pricing pressure within the industry. You may see what we've usually seen in the past is you'll get a influx of smaller sort of I always call them one-man operations, but you'll get a smaller operation, and they'll come in at a lower price. Can they effectively cut a 1,000 home community when they have 6 guys?
Mhm.
The trend for a lot of years was to have on-site services where you had a dedicated crew that only cut one property and equipment dedicated. Are you guys still seeing that in the industry has it gone back to more of a cut, leave the property, and you have your crews able to follow a route, or is it going back to a on-site model?
So what I would say for us is that larger properties that we can have dedicated crews at, then we do that. And a lot of times they work that into the RFP that they only want equipment from their property to stay on their property, which is fine. Knock on wood, we're lucky enough to have the resources to do that. And what you said before, that smaller companies, a lot of times they'll say, yeah, we can do it, no problem. And then what ends up happening is that they end up failing. So other than that, though, smaller properties, we still will go from one property to the next, and we may have one crew that will go to 3 or 4 properties in a month or something like that. So it's both.
And the trend, like it was perspective like years ago, where you did have an awful lot of on-site, where that was the trend. Like Beth was saying earlier, during the recession, a lot of that kind of was rethought. People were like rethinking. So we lost a lot of that during those years. Getting people back to that mindset, it's going to be a challenge. Porter service is one of the things that comes up a lot in a lot of bids, and it's the first line item that's cut, it seems to be. But that's kind of the trend that we've been seeing, is that people are flirting with the idea of on-site, but they're not really ready to commit to the funds to make that really happen full scale like we used to see. And that goes back to the budget piece that we discussed earlier.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would love to see, all these new communities are being built, and most of them do not have any space on the property to store the equipment, which is unfortunate because it adds so much efficiency to how the job is done if the equipment can be stored on the site.
That's a great point. And maybe as the market evolves, maybe if we do have this pressure of areas for places to operate out of, business to operate out of in Palm Beach County, that may be an option going forward. Even for properties that aren't being built, you might be able to dedicate a small area on the property that it's in a visible spot. You can work that into your RFP for the vendor. Because that ultimately, that small little area that you dedicate on your property could reduce your operating cost on your landscaping budget, because now the vendor doesn't have to have travel time induced in to bring the equipment. So to Robert's point, as he was saying before, time in a landscaping bid equals cost. So if your vendor is able to reduce time, right, they're able to reduce travel time to the property. That could result in savings.
Yeah, and fuel costs on top of that, which we all know is very, very high now. So
Yeah, the days of $1.25 a gallon, I think, are long gone. Maybe I'm showing my age a little bit. But we have had some questions come in, a little bit different. I like the one, Stephanie. She has said that specifically in regards to insect control, but I think on a general basis, it could really be applied to anything, is how important is response time? And should response times be included in the contract? Any thoughts from our panel?
So I would say that what we include for our IPM services is that we do monthly inspections. Monthly inspections, that's by, that actual crew that will go out there and look at the property and see if there's anything that needs to be treated, present a proposal for it. If it does, if it's not included in their original scope of work or contract. So if anything else besides that, though, it's going to be the job of the account manager to bring that forward and then, create a proposal to have that treated. Response time, yes, in certain situations, it's going to be much more important than in other situations. If it's bougainvillea, you can probably wait 5 years and it'll still come back to life. But some other plants, it's a little bit more urgent. So it really depends on the situation, but that's something that you'd probably want to consider including in your contracts going forward, if it's not already included.
Well, the industry approach to it is a little term called IPM. It's back around, that term's batted around a lot, but it's massive to everything we've discussed earlier about Beth was saying with some regulations with the different requirements. And what that is integrated pest management. The whole process, like Danny was saying, the crews having eyes on situations. That's what you're paying us for, that people that are not just mowing grass, they're looking for chinch bug, they're looking for all of the issues above, also diseases that we haven't hit on as well. And when it comes down to, if you've got a contract that you're struggling with trying to make your professional firm commit to response times, there are other issues going on with that firm at that point and their management structure that need to be dealt with. And that goes back to kind of what I was saying before. When you're choosing your contractors that you're associating with, you need a firm that you trust, you need an account manager that you trust, and you need someone that you feel like is actually looking out for the betterment of your plants and the betterment of your community, the long-term value of it. And if that trust isn't there and that integrity is not there, then you've got a problem. And that's when a board really should be looking at, what they need to do if that's a continual issue. But for those of us that are involved in this, it's like an insect problem. I always tell people in the green industry, it's very parallel to the fitness industry. It's not what you did yesterday, it's what you did 6 weeks ago, it's what you did 6 months ago that you see the results of. So insect issues are usually something you can see coming, and it's usually about something else other than just go out and kill everything involved. That's where the integrated pest management concept comes in, where you can hopefully get ahead of that curve. And again, coupling with the relationships with your account manager, that they are competent enough to be able to help you understand and see that coming.
Good analogy, Robert.
Thank you, Danny.
And I'll apologize. Apparently I have my landscapers outside my house today, so you may hear them on my background. We did have another question, and I think it's in keeping with the IPM topic right this second, is how much extra money should be in the budget? 1 second. And is IPM cheaper than having blanket coverage for insect control in the contract?
Beth, you want to jump in?
Is it cheaper than blanket coverage? I think it's hard to say. I mean, every property is.
What I would say is that it's an insurance policy, so sometimes it pays and sometimes it doesn't. So it's really hard to answer that question with 100% certainty.
Well, and the thing is, blanket coverage, from my perspective, from the horticultural perspective, it should be the last resort. Blanket coverage is if your infestation has gotten to a point that it's uncontrollable. That's when you blanket treat. the process is to have a process in place to where you're dealing with these things, you're spot treating as seen, you're dealing with things as being treated before it gets to that point. Now, we all know we had the situation like we had several years ago when whitefly just inundated us. We're Florida. We don't have the cold weather cycle that you have in other parts of the country to where we can control insect populations and disease. That doesn't happen here. We have to ride the wave of if we have excessive water, if we have whatever comes in at the time. And we all experienced that whitefly, and it was just covering everything. That's the exception to the rule, but everyone wants to go to that as far as the reasoning for blanket coverage. The days of just killing everything on your property are over with. That's not the process to go for. We all know the ladybug. That's the first thing that everyone goes for as far as killing, but it's a beneficial. Those help us control some other insects. And that's the reason spot treatment keeps you from avoiding killing everything in your product. Blanket coverage, you're killing your ladybugs as well. So it's like, those are the conversations. And again, it's a board's direction as far as how they choose to go at this, how they want to approach it. Legally now, they can blanket coverage on a regular basis if that's how they want to manage their property. And that's their directive at this point. As time progresses, I think the state or counties will step in and say that's not the case in the future, but that's not the case now. But at this time, it's for us, as far as landscape professionals, to be able to sit with the boards and then make the decision about how they want to manage these situations going forward.
And to build on what Robert said there, I mean, at the end of the day, it really comes down to educating, whether it's the property managers or the board members, really just educating them and then letting them make an informed decision instead of just a shot in the dark decision. So.
And I think to build on that, I think what you guys have really sort of brought about in this discussion is your landscaping should not be the forgotten, we signed the contract in January and let's not worry about it again until we get to December. You should not be engaging with your landscaping professionals at contract signing or renewal, right? We're not as defined as say up north where you have 4 seasons. We really have raining and not raining here in Florida. But you should be engaging with these professionals, and I use that term specifically. These are landscaping professionals. If you need an electrician, you don't go to the plumbing guy at Home Depot, right? You go to the electrician. So if you're dealing with issues in your landscaping, you should be engaging with these professionals. I don't think at any point you would contact anyone that's in this panel or anyone even at their respective organizations and say, I have a question, I'd like to have a meeting, and they not respond to you. These people they want your business. They want to give you the best programs. They want your property to look good because, they appreciate when they walk on your property and everything looks nice and cut and trimmed. So really boards, I think it's a takeaway. You should be having more conversations. I'm not saying every week or every month, but you should be having those conversations at least quarterly with your landscaping professionals and seeing what's coming up, seeing what things they're seeing on the property, what changes. We've had a lot of questions as far as response time. That can also be a response time back from the property, right? If they're driving around and they're seeing a row of dead trees, but then the vendor doesn't hear anything about it for 6 weeks, why isn't that communication coming back? So it definitely is a two-way street. You should be engaging with these professionals. They will happily help you at every step.
Well, and Eric, a piece of that, and I don't mean to jump in, but I just want to think the whole panel would say one of the things that's it's very easy to criticize, and it's very hard to applaud efforts in some levels. And I think it's, landscape's one of those. You can always find fault. It's never going to be perfect. It was never intended to be perfect. That's not what we do for a living. We're managing a direction of gardens. We're managing the direction of development for these projects. And you're partnering with a professional to help you go through all the pitfalls. And that should be the baseline for most boards to start. and then from there go on. And I think honestly, if we all approached it from that standpoint, all of us would have A, better lives, B, better properties. And not every property is created the same. I'm not saying, yeah, we all think in terms of some of our premier properties as being, but even we're looking at B and C properties, it's like whatever the goal is for that year, let's try to achieve it. And that should be the baseline for these contracts. And we get caught up in all the other stuff. And that's really where it is. So sorry to jump in.
No, we're having a discussion. So I love when you guys jump in. We're here to listen to you talk, less about me talk. We did have one last question. We're nearing our end of our time here today. So we had a question: how does a small HOA with less than 100 properties, I'm guessing so 100 lots, find a landscaping company that has the expertise and is still affordable? So I'll throw that question out. I think that's a pretty good one to end on. And then allow our panelists to kind of wrap up and give us their final thoughts. So Beth, I will start with you on that. What would be some tips for a smaller property in their search to secure a landscaping company?
That's interesting because actually the HOA that I'm on the board of has about 143 homes. And so that is the situation that we're in. And I think when we did our search, we reached out to 3 vendors, and understanding that we are a small property and the landscaping provider would only be able to be here on certain days, we tried to go with providers that are already working in the area. So that way, if we had an emergency on site, that those crews were in the area and they would be able to hopefully stop by, even if it wasn't their scheduled day. The one thing that we found with the pricing, and we often find even on larger properties, is that, it really is, market pricing, and you get a few bids and they are all within a few percent of each other most of the time, unless there was some miscommunication or something not clear about the scope. Landscaping is very competitive. The pricing is sharp. It usually is in the same ballpark. So I think in that instance, for smaller size properties, the thing to consider is the logistics of how that's going to work for the property and for the community.
Danny.
And what I'd say is that, you want to know a landscaping company's reputation. You want to check their references. Don't go into it thinking that because you're a smaller community that you're going to be like a redheaded stepchild, because that's not the case. We have some smaller communities that are premier communities for us that we use as our own references to send other, properties that we're bidding, to send them in to go and take a look at it. So what I want to say is that, basically just do your due diligence and actually, research the company and go and look at some of their properties and see. And then at the end of the day, pricing is a factor, but don't do it solely on pricing, because that's when, quality ends up going, and nobody wants that.
Danny, and not even checking the references, but also going to the branch, seeing, if you can get a tour of the branch and an inside look at the operations to see what's going on. What does it look like? Is everything? Yeah.
And another thing too is you can ask to meet the account manager. I mean, going into it, a company more than likely is going to know who they're going to assign to your account. So you can ask, hey, can we meet the account manager and see if there's, a connection there. If this person seems like they don't know what they're talking about, then go the other direction.
Good point. Robert.
Smaller, it's difficult. I mean, smaller communities, but position yourself to where, like Danny had said, that for some reason you're going to be treated differently because you are a smaller community. It goes back to what I said earlier. It really depends on the long-term plan for the community. That's the biggest thing that I think a smaller community maybe doesn't have versus one of the larger ones, that they really don't have a direction of where they want to go within the next 5 to 10 years. The conversation either isn't had, or they haven't thought about it, they're dealing with the front and present current fire they're dealing with. But with that being said, make a plan for where you want your community to be so that all your investors could be involved in that, and then sort out the company that can help you get there. that I would say that across the board, but specifically with smaller communities, because I don't think that conversation really is focused on. I see it time and time again where I see smaller communities, especially when they're first being handed over from the developer to the board. It's like they kind of go through this period of just kind of hands up in the air, what am I doing here? It's like, plans are essential.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists today. I think this was just an engaging discussion. You all had just some excellent information, some great points for all of our attendees today. We hope you as attendees have gotten some information. I am going to be sharing the screen now and putting up our attendees information as far as their contacts. You can follow, if you have any questions, you can always email us here at Castle Group. I always love to have anyone go to our social media, our LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, but also too, please feel free to reach out if you have specific questions for our presenters today. They would love to hear from you. They would love to talk with you, see your property, and really engage and offer you some more information as far as the jobs they do in the landscaping for your community. Their emails are here. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to give us a call or email. Thank you again, everybody. We hope you are staying safe through COVID and everything else. Thank you for attending, and have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric.
See you guys later. Thank you so much.